it's producer Mark at KCMO Talk Radio, and if you're an NFL or college football fan, check out my weekly sports betting podcasts. Search College Pick'em Program or Sunday Sharps wherever you get your podcasts, and hit that subscribe button for my weekly picks, including the Chiefs, Mizzou, Kansas, and K-State. Now, here's the Monday in the Morning podcast.
Well, now we got to talk about this issue at a federal level, literally in the halls of Congress. And for a multitude of reasons, the media is going to make this a massive story in the weeks ahead, and I believe they're making an enormous mistake. 6:05 as we kick it off on a Wednesday hump day morning here on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. Chilly start to the morning around Kansas City, but it actually feels pretty good when you step outside today. I don't mind it one bit. What I do mind, and what I believe most Americans mind, is this idea that women must be completely comfortable with biological men in their bathrooms. And if they aren't comfortable with that, what are they called? Transphobes, transphobic, however you want to describe them. They are lambasted as people who are not accepting of others. Well, I believe with the election of Donald Trump 2 weeks ago now, those women should feel more emboldened to stand up and say enough. I am a woman. I am a feminist. I am pro-female. And I don't feel that I should have to sit there in the bathroom stall and worry about whether or not I am walking out to a biological male. You can have respect for people who might believe there's something else, even if the data, the science certainly isn't there. You can respect somebody's right to think they're something they're not. But it doesn't mean you have to go along with their charade. It doesn't mean you have to be uncomfortable as a woman when you go into your private space and you go into a private restroom. And that's the issue that's being brought up right now in the halls of Congress, because there is the first transgender member of Congress set to begin in January, and that is Sarah McBride from the state of Delaware. So Nancy Mace, who is a Republican from South Carolina, has put together a 2-page legislation proposing that House members, officers, and employees are prohibited from using single-sex facilities other than those corresponding to their biological sex and for other purposes. The South Carolina representative says in the measure that allowing biological males into single-sex facilities jeopardizes the safety and the dignity of members, officers, and employees of the House who are female. She wants this passed before they get the next Congress going in January of 2025. And yesterday, Nancy Mace had no problem whatsoever throwing all this back into the face of reporters who are trying to make her out to be the bad guy.
Being a feminist makes me an extremist. I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
There you go. That's how you handle this. If you're Nancy Mace, or if you're just any female, whether you're a member of Congress or you happen to work in the halls of Congress, and there are hundreds and thousands of staffers who work in the halls of Congress who obviously don't have Nancy Mace's platform, don't have name ID, but this should be a reminder that it's not only okay to feel that way, you're not crazy. To all the women out there who have been shunned, who have been embarrassed, who have been told, oh, come on, aren't you accepting? What's wrong with you? No, it's okay. In fact, I think it's normal to feel the way that Nancy Mace does right there in that clip. And what are you going to say to her? What is the media going to say to her as someone who is a survivor of rape when she says, I am not comfortable being in that situation? I'm just not. And I'm not going to have you tell me that if I'm not accepting of this, I'm some kind of bigot. I'm some kind of transphobe. You can be okay with somebody who, for whatever their reasons are, if they're an adult in America and they want to go about things that way, you know what? I'm not here to stop them. But what every decent person should be here to stop is the idea that women have to be forced into these situations and forced to feel uncomfortable in the name of acceptance and dignity and whatever other cute phrase and word they want to use. To basically beat you over to the head and demand that you play along with their game. Now, where should Sarah McBride, this representative from Delaware who's now been elected, Democrat, I know, shocker, where should they end up going to the bathroom? Well, if they don't want to use a men's room, and I might understand why that might be the case as well for this individual. I have yet to see, and I've yet to hear any reports on this because I don't think it's convenient for the media, but there has got to be private restrooms, private unisex restrooms somewhere around Congress, right? The amount of money that our government wastes and throws away, you're telling me there are not unisex single-person bathrooms somewhere in the halls of Congress? This should not be difficult. Nancy Mace has every right to put forth this bill and feel comfortable and protect women in women's restrooms. If the congressperson-elect does not want to use the men's room, okay, I can accept that as well. But you don't get to force yourself into a women's bathroom. And that's where it's like, well, why doesn't the media just report on this, right? Because it doesn't work for the narrative they're trying to push, which is that if you don't want this congressperson-elect Sarah McBride in a female bathroom, well, you're a transphobe. Why don't they just tell us if there's a single-person restroom, unisex, somewhere in the halls of Congress? I'm sure there are multiple of them. I've got to believe there are multiple of them. And then this whole thing is all squared away anyway. John, it's not a big deal.
Yes, to your point, when we realize what they're doing is on purpose and not some accident.
Yeah.
Right. It's easy to say, okay, you know what? The restroom over there, that one, let's just say that's unisex or whatever. Knock first.
Yep.
Boom. They could designate one. This didn't even have to come to the floor, to the news, but it pushes the narrative.
Exactly. And that's where I believe the media is totally missing the boat. If they want to start beating people over the head as bigots who are supporting Nancy Mace, see how that works for you. Please. If you haven't learned anything from the last 2 weeks, see how that works for you. And that's not about unfairly targeting people. That's not about, taking situations out of context. That's not about hating anybody. It's not about ill will towards anybody or wishing harm on anybody. It is about making everybody feel safe, not just those who you want to feel safe. I'm literally sitting here saying, this person, Sarah McBride, I want this person to feel safe as well. They're a human being. But you don't get to say that we don't and should not support Nancy Mace, who also has a right to feel safe. And that's now the big push, to shame someone like Nancy Mace. And if you've heard her talk over the last 24 hours, especially based on that last clip I played, well, she is not backing down. And God bless her for that. 913-408-7957. That's how you reach us on the studio line and the text line here on KCMO Talk Radio. I mean, there's a lot going on right now, obviously. Trump's got new appointments, a lot of things happening mile a minute. And this was the story that many in legacy media chose to focus on yesterday. It's like they really haven't learned their lesson. Maybe they don't want to learn their lesson. I don't know. Maybe it's as simple as that. Maybe they have no interest in learning any lessons, because I don't know what other conclusion at this point you could come to on the issue. 913-408-7957. 614 on a Wednesday morning on KCMO Talk Radio, 95.7 FM. We're streaming on the KCMO Talk Radio app. In the meantime, here locally, a new jail site is getting renewed attention from Kansas City media. Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? We'll dive into it next on KCMO. Well, it's a step in the right direction for Kansas City. There's no doubt about it. They have finally realized that it is time to build a municipal jail after not having one for the better part of 15 years at this point. So Kansas City closed its own jail near the Truman Sports Complex back in 2009. And for 10 years, you had detainees staying at the Regional Correctional Center, which was a building next to the Jackson County Detention Center. That agreement with Jackson County to house detainees ended 5 years ago. And since then, what has Kansas City been doing? Shipping out detainees to rural counties for bed space. Well, what happened last week, and it got lost in some of the crazy news cycle we found ourselves in for the last 2 weeks, but we talked about it briefly last week. The city purchased about $2 million in land to build a dedicated municipal jail site adjacent to Jackson County's detention center. Now, this is great, isn't it? You've got the city using your taxpayer dollars to buy land from the county who's now getting your taxpayer dollars. Isn't that rich, John? Literally.
Is the deal being completed? Because then I was even more interested that now Jackson County will consider it. So maybe a formality.
I think it's a formality.
Yeah, okay.
I don't believe they've officially approved the sale, but I know Frank White did announce it. So
excellent. Okay.
But
so
you
we're
know
moving
what?
forward.
You're right, though. I don't want to
make sure it happens.
Until I see the ink,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Until I see the ink on the paper with these two entities, I've got to see it to believe it. But
yes, sir.
Frank White has said it's going forward. The city has said it's going forward. But could they screw it up between now and then? Absolutely. But for now, we'll pretend like everybody's playing nice and moving forward on this. So the media has been reporting on this the last couple of days in Kansas City. And one thing really stood out to me in a package I saw from Woke 41 yesterday, a.k.a. 41 Action News. And what are they called now? They're not Action News anymore. I don't know. Who cares? Woke 41 is good enough for me. But data from Kansas City, Missouri's police department reported that there were over 2,600 property crimes in the city in the month of October alone. 2,600 in the month of October. That's not like since Labor Day. It's not for the year. That's 2,600 exclusively in the month of October. That is an unbelievable number. That would work out to well over 31,000 property crimes for the year. And all these low-level offenders who don't get arrested, there's not proactive policing, there's not the bodies in the police department that are needed to do the job the way it needs to be done. And then, even if they do get arrested, there's not a convenient place to put them. The debacle that has been this city's handling of crime is really something that can set the city back decades. And everybody can go out there and put positive spins on, well, we got the new streetcar being built. Oh, look at the new streetcar line. Oh, we've got this, and the Chiefs. Okay, well, at the core, what is your job as a city? Keep your people safe, get out of the way so business can prosper if they so choose to do business in your community. It's really, that's it. And the more business prospers, the more money that you will bring in to your coffers, the more revenues you will have as a city to do little projects that you see fit. But in the end, the only thing that you really are in charge of doing is the basic services that are needed: trash, water, public safety, some transportation, realistic transportation, not streetcar transportation, like transportation that actually brings people who work in your city from point A to point B. That's in the end, that's the job. And they haven't had a jail for the better part of 15 years. They've been farming them out to rural counties. And then in the midst of that process beginning back in 2019, what happens? The Summer of Love, 2020, George Floyd. And then, of course, you have politicians who are destroying the police, calling them the problem, ripping them, calling them inherently racist as an organization. And what do you know? Crime starts to skyrocket. And the icing on the cake was having a prosecutor who was actually sympathetic to that ridiculous line of thinking. And that only made things worse. So it was truly a perfect storm that came together in this town over the last few years. And people make it much more complicated than it needs to be. Why do they do that? Well, because it doesn't fit their political narrative. And then if they actually told you what I just told you in about 2.5 minutes and explained it as simply as that, they would be admitting fault on their end. They would be admitting all these politicians, these prosecutors, all these people who, media folks and TV in this town who went woke, who went sympathetic to the woke causes, suddenly they would have to look in the mirror and say, gosh, maybe we screwed that up. Maybe we got caught up in the moment. Maybe, just maybe, we were wrong. No, they can't do that.
Talk about a bombshell.
That's not possible. And that's why instead, what do? They gaslight. And they talk about, hey, this jail is going to be pretty good for Kansas City. Now, here's the problem, too. It's not going to be open until 2026. If you are a small business owner in Kansas City, and you now still have to wait potentially up to 2 years to get a jail in this town to house property crime criminals, that is going to be a long 700 days, John Anthony.
That's in time for the World Cup.
Yeah, well, true.
When things open in 2026 around here, we have to add that.
Yeah, you're right. The drunk tank will be ready for people.
Well, I've lived here all my life, and I'm like, okay, so you're putting the jail. Oh, we're going to put the other one right next to it. Why didn't we come to that idea sooner?
Well, remember, you're right. Remember, too, the city wanted to basically rent some of the space from the county facility that they're building.
I'm like, no, that doesn't increase our facilities by using some that already exist. Let's get more.
Let's get more. Yeah. Let's get merrier. Let's really make criminals fear the law in this town for the first time.
Put up a vacancy sign just like they've got when you go by the Days Inn or something.
10 rooms open.
How many beds? Lighten up out there, Arrowhead. It's a short shot down to the jail.
How many beds you guys got tonight? All right? Let's have some fun with this. That's exactly what they should do, tongue in cheek. But seriously, it is time for criminals to start fearing the law in this town again, because they don't right now. A new jail will help, but in the end, the biggest piece to this puzzle is who and what. It's the prosecutor's office. And there's a new prosecutor who is starting coming up in January. Her name is Melissa Johnson. She beat Tracy Chappell. She is a Democrat. I don't much care. Law enforcement should not be blue versus red. And we'll see if Melissa Johnson is willing and able to live up to that and take some of the arrows from her own side. She will be under a lot of pressure from the wokest of the woke in this town to not do the job the way it needs to be done. And God willing, she'll stand up to him and she'll basically ignore him. The coping is still in full swing, 6:35, as we get it rolling on a chilly but brisk. I love the feeling out there when it's about 40 degrees, clear skies, not too windy. That's what we've got this morning here in Kansas City.
Makes you want to dance.
I know. Mark's already dancing. He's dancing when the clock hits 6:05, man. He is ready to rock. He's got his KU gear on. He's got the hat on. He's got the hoodie on. He's feeling good. So Mark's all fired up this morning on KCMO, as are we. But the coping is still in full swing over at CNN. They can't deal with what happened 2 weeks ago today. And I like to play this because it still brings a smile to my face, and it will continue to bring a smile to my face for the foreseeable future. And if it brings a smile to my face, I think it might bring a smile to your face. So take a listen to this yesterday from CNN. They were talking about how Donald Trump obviously won the election, but now here's the approach. Donald Trump, yes, won the election. Yes, he won the Electoral College by a landslide. Yes, he won the popular vote, something a Republican has not done in 20 years. But the margin of victory for Donald Trump, here's what they're playing up now. the margin of victory for Trump is not all that big.
His popular vote victory ranks 44th out of 51. That ain't exactly strong. Some might argue that is weak, in the words of Tony Blair. In fact, his popular vote win at this point is the weakest, going all the way back. You have to go all the way back to 2000 to find a weaker one, a smaller popular vote victory than Donald Trump currently has. So, yeah, Trump has won the popular vote. But it ain't all that, my dear friend John Berman.
You know, George W. Bush had a bigger popular vote in 2004. And if you're looking at a combination of popular vote and electoral college vote, look, Obama twice had bigger popular vote and electoral college.
Cope more, fellas. Please give yourself a little more. Give your audience a little more cope. Could you please? So Donald Trump won the presidency, the electoral vote, the popular vote, and we were always told that the electoral college was just an old, antiquated, racist way to do things that only helped Republicans. You haven't heard a lot of that the last couple of weeks because, well, they can't play that game anymore. Trump got millions of more votes than Kamala Harris. So now it's like, yeah, well, I mean, he won the electoral college. Well, yeah, I mean, he won the popular vote, but the margin wasn't as big as fill in the blank, George W. Bush, whoever. Okay, guys, you got the presidency, you got the electoral college, popular vote, won the House, won the Senate, won governorships, won every bellwether, won every swing state, made gains in every single state in the country. That, by all definitions, would be considered a landslide. And if you don't want to interpret it that way, if you don't want to believe that, that's your prerogative. Just like you can believe somebody can be a gender that they're not. You can believe what you want to believe. It's America. But in the end, the facts are the facts. Now, Republicans shouldn't act like there will never be another Democratic president again. There will be. Democrats will, once again, at some point, have the House. They will have the Senate. They will have the White House, hopefully not all three at the same time, but that's how America goes. It swings back and forth. But to act like this was clearly not a referendum on behalf of Donald Trump and also a referendum against what they were selling and what they were pitching the American people on, well, it's just being disingenuous. But I suppose for CNN, that is in part what they want their audience to hear. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it actually is for you. 2 weeks ago yesterday did not go as poorly as we thought it might for you.
Can we call them deniers?
We might be able to use that word. I might be okay with the use of the word denier in that situation. Certainly Bob Casey in Pennsylvania is a denier. See what's happening there? I mean, you got a guy who lost the election for U.S. Senate. And now you've got counties counting illegal ballots, according to the state Supreme Court. Bob Casey has not resigned his post as the U.S. Senator from Pennsylvania. It should be Republican David McCormick. And the media is not covering him as an election denier. I find that to be very fascinating. And there was some good trolling yesterday of the situation in Pennsylvania where the incumbent Democrat Bob Casey, who is not conceded to David McCormick. You have counties who are illegally counting ballots. They are breaking state law. The state Supreme Court in Pennsylvania, which is run by Democrats, has said, guys, in these counties, you cannot count these ballots. They're either not postmarked properly, they're not signed. You can't count them. And these counties are like, no, we're counting them anyway. Well, Steve Daines took to the podium yesterday, a Republican U.S. Senator, and he said this.
Hi, I'm Steve Daines. My pronouns are Republican majority.
Well done.
I have a simple message for Chuck Schumer and for Bob Casey. It's over.
It's over. Over. That is Steve Daines, Republican from Montana. My pronouns are Republican majority. I think Mark's pronouns this morning are rock chalk, based on what he's wearing today.
Dang straight.
Yeah, you look good, man.
Thank you.
You look good. Mike in Kansas City, you're on KCMO. What's up, buddy?
Subject came up last week, and the same thing, that the margins weren't that big. And one of the people involved in the conversation said, well, you do realize that the only places that Kamala won were places that didn't have voter ID. And somebody said, well, what's that supposed to mean? So we don't know who was voting or how many people in those places without proper voter ID, how many of those were even legal voters, and it completely refocused the conversation, away from that. But, and that's true. If the state did not have voter ID, they probably went for Kamala. It's just something to think about.
Yeah, no, again, Steve Moore brought that up on the show last week, I think it was, here on KCMO, and that's obviously been something that's been brought up extensively. Now, I don't think it's that simple. This is my 2 cents on that. So people will say, and you've heard that line plenty, we've had guests who have made that point. They've said, hey, the states that were won, and I see Elon Musk make this point as well, the states that were won by Kamala are states without voter ID. You can interpret that and you can say, hey, we don't know where these votes are coming from in these states if the people are voting properly. And trust me, I would love to see all the states have the same election laws when it comes to voter ID that we have in Kansas and Missouri. I think it's very strong here. We do a very good job here. I used to vote in blue states, and I would just show up and I'd say, yeah, I'm Pete Mundo. And they'd say, great. Congrats, welcome in. And then I'd sign something, and then I'd move on with my day. Never had to prove who I was. It was crazy. They would just find your name in the little booklet, and you'd sign next to the name, and then you'd go vote. So I've experienced both ends of it, and obviously we have a much stronger voter ID law here than, places back east and then places out west. But the other side of it is, too, these liberal states obviously don't like voter ID laws. They claim they're racist. It's such an insult to people of color to claim that it's racist to have voter ID laws, as if, one, they don't have IDs, and two, if they wanted to vote, they wouldn't know how to get an ID. I mean, it's so insulting on so many levels. But the other side of the coin here is that, well, because they're liberal states, they are likely to have looser, if any, voter ID laws. So I'm not saying that's wrong, Mike. I'm just giving you, I think, both ends of it. 913-408-7957. It's really the chicken and the egg debate. Which one came first? Are the states blue, which means their people don't care about voter ID laws? Or are the voter ID laws the reason the state is blue? That's really the chicken or the egg conversation around that. 913-408-7957. Donald Trump making more announcements for guests on the show. We've got more people who have been guests on this show who keep getting appointed to important positions on behalf of Donald Trump. How about that? More of those we'll tell you about coming up on KCMO. And a surprising person giving Trump a little bit of love. Not a little bit of love, I'd say a lot of love. I didn't see this coming. I'll share it next on 95.7 FM. We're streaming as you start your morning on the KCMO Talk Radio app or your Alexa or Google Home. More friends of the show keep getting gigs with Donald Trump. This time, it is his pick for education secretary, and that would be Linda McMahon. Linda McMahon is going to be Donald Trump's education secretary, according to multiple reports, and she was at the KCMO Talk Radio studios in the old building. So this would have been pre-COVID, 2019, maybe 2018, when she was the small business administrator, and she was here in Kansas City for an event. So another impressive pick, another good pick by Donald Trump. She will be the education secretary. And I forget what the event was that she was here for, but she was part of the Trump administration. And now she is set to be his pick for education secretary. So good on Linda McMahon. Do you remember her visit, John? You probably don't. We had so many people rolling through that building.
The mention of the fact that there was an event jogs a distant memory.
Yes. And Mark was not a part of the show
speaker
back then.
of the at a special event. Yeah.
Yes, she was here. Mark, you weren't here back then, so you missed Linda McMahon. You would have asked her about the WWF, now the WWE, I'm sure.
Yeah, I remember from the early 2000s, Linda McMahon.
Yes.
Keeping Vince in shape for a little bit.
Yeah.
Whipping him back and forth.
I saw this. You'll appreciate this if you're under a certain age. Linda McMahon to become the first Secretary of Education to have been a playable character in WWF No Mercy for Nintendo 64. Let's go! Woo! That's right. And there's a graphic. I'll actually reshare this on X. It's a Nintendo 64 graphic of Linda McMahon slapping somebody inside the ring. So if you're a WWE fan, I guess, formerly WWF, you'll get a kick out of that at Pete Mundo on X. So she gets the gig for Education Secretary. Dr. Oz has been named the administrator of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, an agency that oversees health insurance programs covering more than 150 million Americans. So Dr. Oz, obviously Trump is keeping it close in his inner circle. It's people that he picked, that he's known for a long time, that he's friends with. So everyone talks about Donald Trump's revenge. He's going to be on a revenge tour. Donald Trump's revenge appears to be just hiring his friends. That appears to be his idea of revenge. Dr. Oz ran for Senate 2 years ago, and he lost to John Fetterman. Dr. Oz was a terrible pick for U.S. Senate in Pennsylvania. The guy was from New Jersey. He wasn't a guy who was ever going to connect with the working man, the steel worker in Western Pennsylvania. That was never going to be Dr. Oz. Everything about the guy was just an awful pick. And if there's one thing that Trump has not done a good job of in his political career, it's picking good candidates in specific races. Herschel Walker, Kerry Lake, Dr. Oz. But I don't mind Dr. Oz for this pick. I have no problem with this whatsoever. But it's funny how it gets spun. New York Times writes here in their piece yesterday, the selection of Dr. Oz was a surprise to many close watchers of the agency, even in a health department that could be led by another unconventional pick, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. It also continued a trend of Mr. Trump selecting television personalities to oversee federal agencies. His candidates to run the defense and transportation departments have been working for Fox News and Fox Business. That in reference to Pete Hegseth, who is his Defense Department pick, and Sean Duffy, who is a former congressman who is now on Fox Business. I love how they break these people down to simply being TV personalities. Like, these are individuals who have a lot of other talents and a lot of other accomplishments. But when it comes to the New York Times, they're just TV personalities.
You better call Jill a doctor, though.
Exactly.
Right.
You better call Jill a doctor. You better refer to Mayor Pete Buttigieg, who had zero experience when it came to being transportation secretary. He's a historic figure because he's gay and likes trains. But Sean Duffy is a TV personality. Dr. Oz is a TV personality. Pete Hegseth is a TV personality. But Jill Biden's a doctor, and Pete Buttigieg must be put on a mantle as a historic figure.
I'm just a DJ, right? When you're on the news and you're like, they're just a TV personality. Hello? Skillet? Huh?
Oh, thank you very much for that. Now, as we roll till 7 o'clock on KCMO, I want to put a bow in the hour with this really interesting comment from a guy who was very much against Donald Trump leading up to the election. I'm not saying he is seeing the light of day, but I'm intrigued by what's going on here. His name is Charlemagne the God. He is the most popular, speaking of DJs, he's the most popular DJ in urban radio. But he's not a DJ. He does a talk show. He's not a guy who just plays music and then, hey, here's Cardi B.
77 degrees, everybody. Here's the new one.
Yeah, no, that's not who Charlemagne the God is. I don't agree with his takes most of the time, but he's not a DJ. He's a smart guy who does a talk show host who's just a little misguided on the politics. Well, he gave Donald Trump some props on his show this week. Now, he was caught up in the whole Trump's a fascist, everything else. But now suddenly he's like rooting on Donald Trump. Why is Charlemagne the God doing that? Well, he's doing that because he, as a guy based in New York, is very unhappy with the new surge pricing that is coming to New York City. They're going to be tacking on $9 to your toll, and the toll is already like $15. If you enter Midtown Manhattan during rush hour, you will have to pay another $9 on top of your $15 toll. So you're talking about $25 to get into Manhattan during morning rush hour and afternoon rush hour. I'm kind of at the point where you'd have to pay me to go into Midtown Manhattan at any time. But, it's not geared towards me. It's geared towards working stiffs who have no choice. So Charlamagne the God says, this is bad policy and Trump should try to take care of this.
And they said the reason they're trying to go so fast with this is because they want to get this done before Trump gets in office. So
yes, because Trump is it is projected that he will just kill the entire thing. This is true.
And guess what? That's a good thing.
Yes.
Listen, here's the thing. That's why I keep telling folks, whether you voted for the person or not, when the person does something that you agree with, I'm all for it. I don't want these congestion prices in New York.
No, it's going to raise the prices for too many people.
Hey,
it's already expensive.
That's right.
Hey, do your thing, Trump. Do your thing.
Do your thing, Trump.
Okay.
All right.
Let
Well,
me stop before they use that in the ad.
they definitely
Lord,
They got you.
Trump did use Charlamagne the God in a couple of his ads towards the end of the election. Now, I don't know what Trump can do about state law in New York. It's bad law, but I'm glad to see that some of our more progressive friends in radio are realizing that more taxes are not good for regular people. And that when politicians tell you they're helping the little guy and they're helping transportation and they're helping, save the planet with their energy policies, they're usually lying to you. So maybe Charlamagne the God's eyes are opening, to which I'm very happy for him and very happy for his audience as well. So there's one project in particular in Kansas City that may have absolutely no chance of happening, especially now that Donald Trump won the election and Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk are set to take over what they're calling DOGE, Department of Government Efficiencies, and they will likely be slashing jobs, regulations, and budgets in some of or at least proposing this, and then Congress has to obviously, in many cases, take it from there. But not in every case. There will be things that they will be able to recommend to Donald Trump that they can just line item, just completely take off the bureaucracies and obviously make the federal government more efficient on behalf of the taxpayer. And one of the projects that could very much have no chance of happening in Kansas City is the South Loop Link that was searching for a $60 million federal grant. Remember, this got rejected almost 2 years ago. The South Loop project, they were looking for a $60 million grant from the Department of Justice. And even Mayor Pete and Joe Biden's Department of Justice said, yeah, we're not doing that. We're not they'll fund anything. It's hard to get these guys to stop spending money that we don't have. But even they said, yeah, we're not going to recommend $60 million for this. And that was to cover the South Loop and create the park and everything else that was going to connect Crossroads to downtown Kansas City. And the main reason for that, according to the Department of Transportation's official report, is there were 4 shortcomings. Cost effectiveness, lack of stable and dependable sources of non-federal funding. Basically, does anybody want to actually build this thing privately? Is there any interest in private investment for the South Loop project? Capacity to carry out the project, and necessary data collection and analysis. So they told the city, yeah, sorry, we're not doing this. And that was almost 2 years ago. So if you think that now Vivek Ramaswamy and Elon Musk, who are going to co-lead the Department of Government Efficiency, they're promising mass reductions in the federal workforce, and you think there's any chance that the federal government is going to come in this administration and give a cent to a project like this, you are kidding yourself. Now, if the city wants to find private investors and contractors who are interested in a South Loop project, they can do it. But the days of our federal government just printing money for projects like this, at least for the next 4 years, are over. And you know what that's going to help with? That is going to help with inflation. Think about it, right? It's just common sense. It's just basic supply and demand. If suddenly now contractors and builders are not taking funny money from the federal government to build projects like the South Loop project that nobody really wants, there's not a real demand for. It was just kind of a cool thing to do if the federal government was going to hand out billions of dollars that we don't currently have. Well, then that would create more demand in the contracting space and other projects. Because at the very top of the food chain, you would have the federal government building things that nobody really wants, that nobody really needs, that no one's interested in paying for, but that if the government wants to print the money to pay for it, well, someone will gladly take the money. What has to happen then? All the people who would have worked on that project now have to find another project from there. So there's this downstream effect that helps out the entire industry, helps out Kansas City, and in the end will help cool off inflation even further. This is not all that difficult. It's not like rocket science. It's just basic economics. When you stop the dumb spending, when you stop the spending on things that would never have a chance of happening if it wasn't for the government getting involved. And I'm not talking about, basic roads and bridges. This South Loop Park project that would connect downtown KC to the Crossroads was poorly thought out, is a huge waste of money, and is frankly just something that the Chamber of Commerce folks love. Working class, regular people in Kansas City, north of the river, south of the river, white, black, Asian, Latino, they have nothing to benefit from this. You know who it really benefits the most? It benefits people who go down the T-Mobile Center for concerts, right? Who probably don't even live in Kansas City, Missouri, may live in Johnson County. And it benefits, young hipsters who are down on the Crossroads. That's it. But the regular people who make the city work, there is no benefit from any of this. And you might say, well, they'd be working on the job if they're in construction. They'll find another job. The free market is supposed to work based on the wants and the needs of the people, based on what is actually demanded, what actually works, what businesses and banks can actually get behind, not based off of the funny money that the government prints, where they throw money at projects and say, sure, go build this. That's not how it's supposed to work. Now, speaking of Doge, Javier Milei down in Argentina, there was a really good thread that I saw yesterday about him, how he took over here in the last couple of years. And Argentina was on the brink of collapse. And what did this guy do? In his first month on the job as president, he cut 50,000 government jobs. He eliminated half of all the ministries. He slashed thousands of regulations. And they had inflation that was in the thousands on a percentage basis. And he cut it to 2. He achieved the first surplus in 123 years. The economy started to grow again. People told him that in Argentina, the bureaucracy was too big to cut. And he proved them wrong in a month. Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are studying what he did in Argentina. And they are hopefully going to replicate that model as much as they can here coming up in January. And you are going to hear a lot of reporting from people who are in government, part of the D.C. Beltway, who are going to explain how suddenly your lives are going to be worse. Our lives are going to be worse because of the bureaucratic bloat that is soon hopefully going to be slashed. And it's all going to be nonsense and hot air and noise. When these guys, I believe, go line item by line item to the amount of nonsense that exists in these federal bureaucracies, and that includes the military. I'm not absolving the military from this. I guarantee you, when we find out we're spending $10,000 on a hammer, we'll be able to find some bloat there as well, on the defense side and the military side. It is time to look under every single stone that exists in the federal government and figure out whether or not we need it. It will help with the basic necessities. Now, it won't be good for people who are riding the government gravy train, but you know what? For regular people who pay taxes, who actually fund the government, who don't want to be in $36 trillion in debt anymore, it will end up being a major, major win. And in Argentina, if they can cut 15% of the fat in about 30 days and have no chaos, no collapse, and just results, I'd like to think that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy can help do the same thing with the Department of Government Efficiency. And that also means no South Loop project in Kansas City. Sorry for those 7 of you who really wanted to see that happen. 8:05, happy Wednesday. Hump Day. It's good to be here on KCMO Talk Radio. So now we've got this fight going on in Washington, D.C., and it shouldn't really be a fight, but what you have now is a push led by Nancy Mace of South Carolina. And Nancy Mace, a Republican from South Carolina, member of Congress, wants to make sure that an incoming congressperson named Sarah McBride does not get to use the women's restrooms in the halls of Congress. Now, why would that be? Well, because Sarah McBride used to be Tim McBride. Sarah McBride is a congressperson-elect from Delaware. And Nancy Mace is not here for it. She's not having it. She does not want this person in her bathroom. And she has every right to feel that way. So, of course, the media is going nuts on this. I mean, the media is acting like Nancy Mace is the worst person ever. ABC News had a reporter confront her outside the halls of Congress as she tries to get this piece of legislation passed before they start the next Congress coming up in January. And Nancy Mace was having none of it. Here's what it sounded like.
Speaker Johnson has said he wants to treat every new member with the words dignity and respect. Forcing this congressperson to go into a male restroom, is that dignity and respect?
Forcing women to share private spaces with men is not dignity and not respect. And I'm absolutely going to stand in the way of anyone who thinks it's okay for a man to be in our locker room, in our changing rooms, in our dressing rooms, in women's bathrooms. And in fact, if you agree with that, you're crazy, because that's not okay. It's not okay.
Congresswoman,
Thank you, Congressman. We're going to peel away from this conversation, Kira. So a little bit of the context of what we were just talking about, and I'm going to have my cameraman step out of the active driveway here.
I think that ABC News reporter was rethinking a career after he got his butt chewed out the way he just did there by Nancy Mace out of South Carolina. Nancy Mace, who also has talked about being a victim of sexual abuse, highlighting one of the many reasons that she does not feel comfortable with this potential situation. She has proposed a resolution to prohibit House lawmakers and employees from using single-sex facilities other than those corresponding with their biological sex. That includes bathrooms, locker rooms, and changing rooms. Members typically also have private bathrooms in their office suites. So if you have a private bathroom in your office suite, that's a pretty good deal, is it not? Now, I've been in some of the Congress people that we have here in Kansas and Missouri. I've been in their offices in D.C., same with senators as well. And I think it depends on which building you're in. And, you know, if you're a new member, you've got a, shall we say, not as good of a setup as some of the longtime members of Congress who have some of the nicer offices. But if that's the case, then this should oftentimes be a moot point. I mean, you should pass this resolution, no doubt about it. If you're Speaker Mike Johnson, this is a no-brainer. But then also, if you're trying to say, well, where's Sarah McBride going to go to the bathroom? Well, if you have a private bathroom in your office, that would be an obvious answer. And then also, I've got to believe, and I wish that somebody in national media who is right there in D.C. would report on this, I've got to believe that there are single-sex restrooms somewhere in the Capitol building, in which case, one in, one out, you've got an option. You don't have to go to the men's room. I love the way that got reported by the ABC guy, by the way. Let me just replay that opening question from him.
Speaker Johnson has said he wants to treat every new member with the words dignity and respect. Forcing this congressperson to go into a male restroom, is that dignity and respect?
What a bunch of gaslighting nonsense, for lack of a better phrase that I would get fined by the FCC for saying. So dignity and respect, you see, there's a pyramid. Here's how this works. There's a pyramid. All right? There's a pyramid, and depending on how many boxes you can check off when it comes to your victimization level, dignity and respect does not apply to you if somebody else can check off more victim boxes than you. See, being a feminist, being pro-woman is so like 5 years ago. Now, if you say, I want to protect women from situations they may not want to be in, well, what are you, a transphobe? No, wait, hold on. A few years ago, we'd all say, yeah, rah, feminists, protect our women, protect our daughters. Yes, this is great. Now, if you do that, if you say what Nancy Mace is saying there, well, you're transphobic. Well, no, I guess we don't care about the dignity and the respect of women because the people who matter more to us, based on the victimization pyramid that we've created in woke America, is someone who's a man who identifies as a woman. Their dignity and respect matters more because they are further up the victimization chart than just women are. That's how this now works in this magically woke America that some are trying to continue to create, even though America sent a referendum message on that 2 weeks ago in the election. 913-408-7957. Let's go to Brandon. He is in Bay City. What's up, Brandon?
Hey, yeah, the conversation about men transitioning to the women and using the women's restroom is one that gets talked about the most. But really, I'm not real comfortable with the women transitioning to the dudes coming into the guys' bathroom either. I don't know, do they still wear perfume, or I don't know if they're slapping on the Old Spice or whatever the case may be, but, and mine's maybe a little bit different take on this, but, if you've ever gone into a unisex bathroom after a woman's been in there and it smells perfumey and all that and stuff, but what I'm going in there to do is kind of combating fragrance, if you will, with what's
I get
there.
it. I get it, Brandon. I get it. Okay. So what you're doing, yes. Okay. It's a thing. Thank you for giving me that image at 8:12 in the morning.
Sorry, but yeah, so
listen,
yeah, to me it just doesn't work. And I think our current president would actually agree with me on this, because when he's sniffing somebody's hair, he's probably not thinking about what went on in the presidential washroom just a few minutes before. But
probably not.
I don't know.
Probably not. I'm glad you already had your breakfast there, Brandon. I greatly appreciate it, buddy. But some people haven't. So take it easy. Take it easy there, champ. All right? Easy does it. Yes, I have. I mean, we got him up at the airport. Go up to the airport. You've got the unisex bathrooms where everyone's got kind of a stall. You can go in, go out. You wash your hands as you see fit, and, you go from there. That's not what they have in Congress, obviously. In the halls of Congress, there's men's rooms and there's women's rooms. So the question then is, how do you make this work for everybody? The answer is not to allow this congressperson-elect, Sarah McBride, who used to be Tim McBride, into the women's room if women are uncomfortable. You don't get to tell women that they just have to deal with it because of this made-up victimization chart that you guys have created in your own minds. I also understand if Sarah McBride doesn't want to use the men's rooms. Okay. If you say, well, I'm Sarah McBride, I'm not comfortable using the men's room, that's fine. But you don't get to then make women uncomfortable because you're uncomfortable. So where do we find a happy medium here? What do we do? Well, if this person has a bathroom in their office, that's an easy step. If there are unisex bathrooms somewhere around Congress, that's an easy step. But forcing women to be uncomfortable to play along in this game of someone insisting there's something that they biologically never were is not a fair approach either. And if that makes me a feminist as the father of 3 young daughters, then I'll be a feminist all day, every day, baby. 913-408-7957. I'll get to your calls on this coming up. And also, what is the Speaker of the House saying about this? Mike Johnson. We'll get to that. And as I was getting ready for the story this morning, I thought of an old drop from Emmanuel Cleaver, our local congressman from 2021, when the wokeness was in full swing. I'll never forget this.
A man and a woman.
A man and a woman. Can you define them for me, Congressman Cleaver? Pete Mundo on 95.7 FM KCMO and streaming at KCMOTalkRadio.com. South Carolina Congresswoman Nancy Mace is just letting it rip right now as she tries to make it so that only biological women are in the women's restrooms in Congress, since we do have the first trans member of Congress, Sarah McBride, set to enter the halls of Congress coming up in January out of Delaware.
Being a feminist makes me an extremist. I'm totally here for it.
Is this effort in response to Congresswoman McBride's coming to Congress?
Yes, and absolutely, and then some. I'm not going to stand for a man, if someone with a penis is in the women's locker room, that's not okay. And I'm a victim of abuse myself. I'm a rape survivor. I have PTSD from the abuse I've suffered at the hands of a man. And I know how vulnerable women and girls are in private spaces. So I'm absolutely 100% going to stand in the way of any man who wants to be in a women's restroom, in our locker rooms, in our changing rooms. I will be there fighting you every step of the way.
All right, that's Nancy Mace. We'll share with you what Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, had to say coming up on KCMO Talk Radio. All right, let's go to the phones. Libby, Waldo, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Oh, hi there, Pete. Thank you for taking my call, and thank you, John. I'm a federal employee, and I can tell you that federal buildings, at least the federal building I work in, we have multiple options for using a bathroom. We have two singles, one on one side of the hallway, one on the other side. Anybody can go into those. They're single. But we have the ones marked for women and the ones marked for men, and those have 6 stalls plus one bathroom for people with disabilities. It's much larger. So there's absolutely no reason to be redesigning anything like that. And we have bathrooms on every floor. I don't know how many teams, maybe 5 rows of 25 teams in one section. There's a bathroom in that section. So there's no excuse. There's no reason at all to say, well, there's not a bathroom for me and my choice. That's bullcorn. I know that I was in a bathroom one time, and I know the person was a man, and I was extremely uncomfortable. I was pretty scared. I didn't want that person near me.
And
So
listen,
anyway.
and you are, thank you, Libby, and you are more than allowed to feel that way. Anyone who's saying, well, if you feel that way, you're just a horrible person and you're some kind of a phobe. No, I know people who have been in the same situation as Libby just talked about right there. But they're afraid to say they're uncomfortable. I am hopeful that we're getting to the place now where you can respect somebody who wants to be what they want to be. In America, it's still America. You can be what you want to be. It's not my job, not my place to tell you what you want to be and what you can do. But it doesn't mean I have to be comfortable with it in a setting as personal as a bathroom. And it's amazing because I do wonder if Democrats want this fight. I found this story from June of 22, and it says that 2 Democratic lawmakers are calling for the installation of more gender-neutral bathrooms in the U.S. Capitol. That signals to me that they already exist in the Capitol. More, exactly. Saying it would make the People's House more welcoming to transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. This is from NBC News, so take that interpretation with a grain of salt. But the word more tells me that there are currently gender-neutral bathrooms in the Capitol.
Well, they need to be 6 feet apart
or
something.
So, case closed, right? Pass the legislation from Nancy Mace and then move on. Because there's not like, this person has to hold it and go pee in the bushes outside the building or something. There are options inside the building for them. Jim, go ahead. You're on KCMO.
Yeah, Speaker Johnson could solve this problem, too, by actually putting his proper name on his door and his desk, and then there in Congress where he votes, their working desk there, he can actually put his proper name on there.
Well, but here's the thing, Jim. These people, a lot of them legally change their names. So if they legally change their names, then their name is not what their name was.
Well, that's true, too. But he can also put a writ that if you're caught in the wrong bathroom, you'll be expelled from the building and you cannot get back in, and that would solve a lot of problems right there.
Well, that would have to be done through legislation, Jim. I think you know that, and I know that. Listen, I'll call someone whatever they want to be called. If your legal name is something different from what you were born with, I don't care. I'll call you whatever your legal name is or whatever you want to be called. John wants to become Bob tomorrow. I'll call him Bob.
Snake. I'm Snake.
Yeah, all right. That's fine. I'll call you a snake. Whatever you want to be. What are you implying there? Snake. Okay. I'll call you whatever you want to be called. I don't care. But the bathroom issue is totally different from like, hey, call me fill in the blank. These are two completely separate topics, right? So here was Speaker of the House Mike Johnson addressing this yesterday. The media is going for the gotcha journalism here. You can tell based on the question. Let's roll this.
Mr. Speaker, is freshman-elect Sarah McBride a man or a woman?
Look, I'm not going to get into this. We welcome all new members with open arms who are duly elected representatives of the people. I believe it's a command that we treat all persons with dignity and respect, and we will. And I'm not going to engage in silly debates about this. There's a concern about the uses of restroom facilities and locker rooms and all that. This is an issue that Congress has never had to address before, and we're going to do that in a deliberate fashion with member consensus on it, and we will accommodate the needs of every single person. That's all I'm going to say about that. Yes,
Do you plan on bringing Nancy Mace's transgender bill and putting that into the rules package?
I'm not going to address the plans on any of that. I just told you what I'm going to say about the issue. I'm not going to engage in this. We don't look down upon anyone. We treat everybody with dignity and respect. That's a principle that I've pursued my whole life, and we will take care of this, issue of first impression for Congress, as we will any other thing. We'll provide appropriate accommodation for every member of Congress.
We will treat everybody with dignity and respect, and that's not a difficult conclusion to come to. Mike Johnson is right. And treating everybody with dignity and respect means what, though? What it means, or what it should mean, is that Nancy Mace's bill will pass, should pass. If there are many women who are uncomfortable being in a bathroom setting with a biological male, then we should treat them with dignity and respect. And we can also treat Sarah McBride with dignity and respect by saying you will have multiple bathroom options in Congress. You don't have to go to the men's room, but we're not going to allow you into the women's room. And there will be unisex bathrooms, and there are unisex bathrooms, and here's where they are. But Sarah McBride does not get to project onto women by saying the only way that you can show me dignity and respect is by allowing me into your bathroom. That is not how this works.